The show where there are no penalties, nothing is offside, and everything is fair game. This is The Gloves Are Off.
Welcome to another edition of The Gloves Are Off. I'm Moses Bolden. We got a great show for you. We're going to talk about NSRBL playoffs. Should there be lights or no lights? We'll talk about that, and we'll understand that question in a second. Plus, we also got a lot of talk about Riders, Bombers, baseball. What can we say? A lot of stuff going on. Greg Buchanan, how are you?
Not too bad.
Excellent races over the weekend, too, out in Dewberry for the Frog Lake First Nations races. My goodness, what a finish.
Yeah, great finish. Great to finish the Prairie Racing Series. Jamie Labicane winning now. Just 2 more weekends left, and we'll crown a CPCA champion.
Turtleford's the next spot.
Yep.
That will also be very entertaining. Usually the lead up right to Lloydminster in mid-August. Speaking of a guy who's not a stranger to lead-ups, preparations, you name it, you are definitely Rod Shoplin. You are the Lloydminster Tennis Association president.
President.
You got her. And of course, developed a lot of young kids who've done very well offhand, especially, I guess now we have the tournament coming up here for the adults later this week.
We do. This is our 23rd annual. We're calling it the Paul Douglas Tournament this year, as we did last year. And because a friend of ours is taking cancer treatments in the U.S., and we thought, he was a big part of tennis in Lloydminster and still will be, and we just wanted to honor him a little like that.
Truly amazing to see all the people gather around tennis. Definitely one big family. So awesome to have you on, Rod. And of course, we'll start the show off with a little bit of confusion I had at the beginning. Lights, what are they talking about? Well, I'll talk about the NSRBL. And what happened last week. On Thursday night, we had a thrilling game, a little bit messy, but a thrilling game between the Wilkie Brewers and Lloydminster Twins. 10-10 going into the 9th inning. However, the game was called off. Why? Well, because it was too dark. There are no lights. Out of all the ballparks, or all the ball diamonds at Legion Ballpark, 5 of them, of course, are softball diamonds. All of them have lights, even the ones that are facing the highway, except the baseball diamond, diamond number 1. That's where they had the games. So the game was called off. The game had to be replayed, will be replayed tonight. And that's been an issue with some of the ball players, saying, why do all these other slow pitch diamonds have this, but we don't? Now, whose responsibility is it to pay for that type of facility?
Well, first of all, I have to do a history lesson on that. 25 years ago when I came to town at Legion Ballpark, it was a softball town. The Wasted Inliners were a junior men's team that was winning national championships after national championships, bringing in players from across the country to play here in Lloydminster. It was fantastic ball. Thus, they had lights for those diamonds, for fastball, softball. At that time, 25 years ago, baseball was non-existent here in town. Baseball's come back now, and I think it's the onus of the city. I don't really think that user groups that use a facility, they must have to pay something to use the facility at Legion Ballpark. They shouldn't have to pay for upgrades. Whether you're at a tennis court or you're a ball diamond, if you need upgrades, it's part of your fees. We don't go to the Civic Center and say we need a new ice plant. Now everybody throw your money in the hat and let's build an ice plant. It's part of your taxes, it's part of your fees. The city has spent a lot of money in real foolish ways over the last number of years, including a week back in February that I won't really go into, but I just say a lot of money was spent that week to showcase Lloydminster on a national spotlight. Spent a lot of money. What was the return for the city? What was sacrificed? Were things sacrificed like lights for tennis courts, like lights for ball diamonds, just so we can be on CBC for a week?
And Rod, I guess this would tie into you because, of course, you mentioned just before we went on air that for yourself, the facility there that is publicly run, you guys had to fund for your own set of lights, correct?
Yeah, way back when there was only the lights on one side, and they were very poor quality lights. And we approached the city, and they said, well, there's really nothing we can do about that. But I suppose if you could get fundraised, we could work with you on that. So we did. We fundraised for that particular for the lights, and we got the lights. And we paid most of it, and the city did kick in some money. I grant you that. But it was the user group that paid for it.
Yeah.
But it ties in because there's a lot of groups that will say, well, we need better facilities here. Football, I've talked to people that said, we need a good football field or what have you. I know certain things aren't necessarily, you mentioned the feasibility. It doesn't always work. But when it comes to publicly funded areas, parks, you name it, that should have been the basis for the city to take care of, not necessarily the ball players.
Exactly.
That's basically what you're getting at.
Well, I relate to the fact that, run the Bandits, and if we want upgrades to the rink, we're not going to, except for our dressing room. If we want to do any upgrades to the dressing room, we have to get permission to do that, and that's coming out of our own pocket. And I think if you're renting a facility, you're a tenant. It's up to your landlord. The landlord is the city to make those upgrades, and that's the reason why we pay our taxes.
I agree. We've wanted tennis courts in the city for a long, long time now, and the city has promised us courts, and yet we don't see them. And they had discussed with us at one point in time, saying, "Well, why don't you guys build the courts?" Well, we don't want private courts.
No.
We want public courts for public use, right?
Yeah, you have 4 tennis courts.
4 tennis courts for 30,000 people.
That's not going to be enough.
You
And
have
of course,
4. You go to any other city, and they have 4 tennis
I
courts in
think
an
this is the
apartment
best thing
building,
you should do. You know what? Instead of asking the city, maybe you should ask a certain gentleman named PK Subban for some money. Maybe he'll kick it in. Because, of course, he had a nice, handsome raise over the weekend, 8 years, $72 million. What took the Montreal Canadiens so long to pay him this kind of money? Because it seemed to me that they were just really, really getting at him. And if I was PK in this situation, I would have taken a bridge contract, waited till 2016, which he would have been an unrestricted free agent, and said, "See ya, I'm going to go for big bucks elsewhere." Do you think that was smart, or what was the reasoning for Montreal doing a thing like this, playing this type of game with arguably your best player?
The worst thing that happened through this is arbitration. What happens with arbitration, the two sides sit down. PK says, the reason why he should be paid this much. They say why he shouldn't be paid this much. So there's going to be a lot of negative coming from Montreal. He's in the same room hearing all this, and then afterwards you're supposed to hold hands, kiss, and make up and play again and act like nothing happened in that room. But there's damage done in those arbitration hearings that never gets repaired. And you talk to any player, and there's bad feelings between the two sides for years to come. I think more than anything, I think the ownership in Montreal, they're not going to say it, ownership in Montreal didn't want to pay him to him at first, and then got pressure. It's tough in Montreal. The fan base there, they wanted him. Then they want the ownership
Especially
to buck
in the
up.
2 years, too.
I agree. Like, they wanted him, and he wanted to stay. That was the big thing.
Yeah.
He wanted to play
Yeah.
in Montreal. So I think management perhaps had a bit of an edge there. They thought they could work him a little on that.
But here's the thing. He was a guy you signed to a 2-year deal, see what he did. He won a Norris Trophy and led your team in points in the playoffs, as a defenseman, no less. So I think he was well-deserved this money. Do you guys agree?
Yeah.
Well, you could say in the scheme of things, like in terms of how
For
a
his
defenseman
market,
should be paid
for his market, for Montreal, he probably deserves what he gets paid.
Okay.
Overall, is he the top 3 defenseman in the NHL? I don't think so. Is he the top defenseman in Montreal? Yes, definitely.
No, okay. And you agree?
And management's taking a big gamble, giving a tournament or a contract that long.
Yeah, and that's the thing that bothered me too, and it's good that you brought that up, because when we were going through this labor unrest and we had lockouts and we had strikes, and the thing that the owners said, we don't want to sign long-term deals.
Well, they did.
Guess what they're doing? They keep on doing it, and we're going to, in 3 or 4 years down the road, we're going to be right back to where we were. And not that long ago, we were having another stoppage.
Luckily for the actual viewers, it's only going to take 2 minutes before we're back on air. We're going to take a quick time out. When we return, we'll have more. Gloves are off.